I'm going to have to be very, very careful about what I say about this. I'm just going to report facts that are in the public domain, have been reported in the national newspaper and the Daily Record. So, yes, our leader, the leader of the Social Democratic Party in Scotland, Craig Houston, was arrested late last week, in relation to a Communication Act issue.
All of those details, all of that footage, was used by the Crown Prosecution Service and the presiding judge to say, well, the fact that he was attacked meant that his protest was likely to upset Muslims in the vicinity, therefore he committed a public order offence. So if you're attacked by some nutcase jihadist who's upset that you burned a book on principle because you're protesting Erdogan or terrorism or whatever, then the state will use it as the excuse to prosecute you for offending said jihadist.
Let's say a person gets a job and looks at the organisation and says, it's too male, pale and stale here. I think that's racist, because you're saying there's too many white people here.
Yes.
I think that's flat racism, and it's clear that it is. No one ever acts on that.
You're not so insecure about the truth of your book that you need to attack every Tom, Dick and Abdul that puts a lighter to it. Not the case for the inverse of said tribal minorities who feel that they need to bring a blade out.
I want more trade friction, because we've got a major problem. We've got a 90 billion trade deficit with the European Union every year. So you're getting poorer. You're actually getting poorer. You're selling your assets and you're issuing debt by that amount every year, and people wonder why the country's knackered and beggared.
Welcome back to Deprogrammed. This is the NCF show where we do our best to fight back against the forces of ideological conformity, especially among the young. I'm Harrison Pitt. I'm a fellow at the New Culture Forum, and I'm thrilled to be joined today, as ever, by Connor Tomlinson, one of the leading contributors at Courage Media, and our guest panellist this week, William Clouston, leader of the left conservative Social Democrat Party, the SDP. And I'm actually going to come to you first, Will, because we've had this in the diary for quite a while, but fortuitously enough, we're living through a crisis of free speech at the moment. Someone's just been fined for burning a Quran. I'm sure we'll get to that. But you've just had your Scottish leader arrested.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be very, very careful about what I say about this. I'm just going to report facts that are in the public domain, have been reported in the national newspaper and the Daily Record. So, yes, our leader, the leader of the Social Democratic Party in Scotland, Craig Houston, was arrested late last week, in relation to a Communication Act issue, as far as we know.
This is the 2003 Communications Act brought in by the...
That's what we understand. We understand. And he has been charged, and as a result, I can't actually say very much more about it. On a separate point, I would say that myself and the SDP leadership team support Craig and have every faith in him, and we hope things work out. But I can't really say anything more. I think it is a first, as a matter of fact, that a politician, indeed a political leader, has been arrested in this way.
As Connor, I think, was saying just before we came on, we do have a Conservative MP who's fallen afoul of the non-crime hate incident affair because he said something somewhat disobliging about Bahrain or about Kuwait. Is that right?
It wasn't even that. He was saying flippantly to an activist that was shouting at him. I think it was "Go back to Bahrain," and he followed up with, "It's a nice place."
Yes, exactly.
And then still was a recipient of a non-crime hate incident.
If you're going to brandish the Bahrain flag or the Kuwaiti flag or whatever it happened to be in public, as a sort of testament to your kind of tribal, ethno-religious cause, then it shouldn't actually be that offensive to tell you that you might want to go and hang out there. Okay, but the Daily Record did cover this story about your Scottish leader. We'll plaster an image of it on the screen at the moment. It's not the first time, is it, Connor, that we have seen people falling afoul of what seems to be developing as a sort of de facto Islamic blasphemy law in this country. The most high-profile example recently was the case of a Kurdish Armenian atheist named Hamish Koskan, I think.
Hamit Yoskan.
Apologies to the defendant, who has been fined by the British state for burning a Quran outside the Turkish consulate in London. While doing so, he was allegedly stabbed, in fact, by a fanatical Muslim zealot. And hilariously enough, this Muslim zealot isn't going to face trial until 2027. Meanwhile, Koskan finds himself fined.
There's some further details that are worth pulling on there as well. So, first of all, the chap who is on camera brandishing some sort of blade while another guy who's filming shouts he's got a knife is denying that he had a knife. There's no respect for honesty whatsoever. They're just like trying to get away with things. And the other one is that a passing Deliveroo driver, because, of course, welcome to the UK, kicked him while he was down at Yoscon. No word on whether or not he's been charged, again, despite being on camera. Presumably, we have his route. I mean, perhaps it's because he's an unlicensed delivery driver, and that looked pretty bad for Deliveroo, because we know, thanks to the Telegraph, there are a bunch of illegal immigrants in London making £500 a week delivering people sandwiches on bikes that seem to catch fire and burn the hotels down. So all of those details, all of that footage, was used by the Crown Prosecution Service and the presiding judge to say, well, the fact that he was attacked meant that his protest was likely to upset Muslims in the vicinity, therefore he committed a public order offence. So if you're attacked by some nutcase jihadist who's upset that you've burned a book on principle because you're protesting Erdogan or terrorism or whatever, then the state will use it as the excuse to prosecute you for offending said jihadist.
Forgive the brief interruption. Now, don't eat breakfast until you learn about caloric bypass. Your breakfast is setting you up for the entire day to either gain weight or lose it. The term breakfast literally means to break your fast that you started the night before. About 4 hours after you eat dinner, your body switches from the nutrients we get from food to the stored glycogen we have in our bodies. Once glycogen stores are depleted, typically after 8 to 12 hours of fasting, the body shifts to burning fat for energy. Fatty acids are released from fat stores where they are converted into ketone bodies through a process called ketogenesis. Then, when you eat breakfast in the morning, the body starts the cycle again. This is where the caloric bypass comes into play. Dr. Gundry, a heart surgeon in California, learned that if you break your nightly fast with something called MCTs, or medium-chain triglycerides, you can actually keep burning fat throughout the day and use it for energy. But there are specific types of foods that contain these MCTs. Using this breakfast breakthrough, he was able to lose 70 pounds just through diet, and he did this in his 60s. You can find out all about it and his exact method by going to thehealthyfat.com/culture. That's thehealthyfat.com/culture. Or click on the link in the description box below. It is important to remember that everyone's body processes fat differently, and it all depends on your unique metabolic type, which is why in the video he released for my special viewers, he talks all about it. It really is quite fascinating and might change the way you think about health. Go to thehealthyfat.com/culture or click on the link in the description box below. Back to the video. If I'm not mistaken, the CPS initially sought a much stronger charge, and it was only because of the efforts of the Free Speech Union and indeed Robert Jenrick, who raised awareness of this case, that it went from being, I mean, hilariously at first, this gentleman was going to be charged with offending Islam as a religious institution. Isn't that correct?
Yes. And then it's been dropped to racially and religiously aggravated
Public
Order Act against Muslims.
Against Muslims, yes.
But then what was mental is that he endured a struggle session during the cross-examination where the Crown Prosecution Service asked, well, why did you burn the whole book rather than select passages? As if that would have mattered.
That would have mattered, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Crown Prosecution Service complained that he said, F Islam. And they said, well, did he really need to say that? It's like, right, so you're playing Martin Bailey here, because you're saying it's not because he burned the book, but then you're saying, why did you burn the whole book? And then you're saying it's not that he offended Islam, it's that he offended individual Muslims, proven by the fact that he nearly got stabbed and kicked in the head by a Deliveroo driver. But then, oh, why did you shout F Islam? You've upset Islam. So,
but it does. So what, I'm going to ask you guys a question about this. So, I mean, I take it that you're both agreed that it's an appalling thing to do to burn religious texts. You don't think it's? I think it is.
No.
I think it's an appalling thing
I don't
to
think Islam deserves respect.
No. Okay, well that's a separate issue. I don't think people should be going around burning religious texts, but I don't think it should be illegal in this case to do it, because I don't think he was doing it in a mosque. They brought out a public order issue. And I think the fact that he's doing it next to the Turkish consulate is a factor in this. I think that's different. Say, I mean, people online commented. Some Catholics actually said, "What would happen if someone came into my church during Mass and started burning the Bible? Is that not a public order offence?"
Well, it's not public order offence, that'd be private property. If
Yeah.
you're doing it in the street, you wouldn't get attacked by a Catholic because, I mean, judging by the...
It would be unlikely.
Well, the verse in the Gospel of Matthew is that, you know, you're vindicated by those who persecute you. So you're not so insecure about the truth of your book that you need to attack every Tom, Dick and Abdul that puts a lighter to it. Not the case for the inverse of said tribal minorities who feel that they need to bring a blade out.
Yeah, I think it's wrong. I don't want to see people going around burning religious texts, but I think in this case, I think the magistrate's got it wrong. I don't think I think she should be acquitted.
Christianity, of course, in this country also has the distinct disadvantage that it cannot credibly pose as a sort of cringing minority, and so it can't tap into the kind of minoritarian moral principles that animate so much of our justice system, not only at the level of law, but at the level of the application of the law by the individual magistrates and the sort of guidance that they're given in terms of how they should interpret it, which is why I wanted to ask you, Will, as the leader of a political party, do you think that the law itself needs a radical overhaul in this way, or is the problem more the manner in which things like instruments like the Public Order Act, expanded much since 1986, are applied, or is the problem with the statutes themselves, in your view?
I think it's mainly how it's applied. I think that's a lot of people argue for a First Amendment right, and you can make the case, and it's probably a good case. But I think because again the question was asked, how many times has this happened in relation to Christianity? How many times have Christian symbols and texts been abused? I mean, you could argue, for instance, I think it's a perfectly sound argument. Anyone at all that burns the British flag in the street is burning a symbol which not only has a great deal, it's attached to us as a nation, and it's sacred in that sense, but it's also a religious symbol because it's the St. George's Cross and it's the St. Andrew's Cross. These are Christian symbols as well. So you're actually burning what is pretty much a Christian symbol, yeah. And I don't know of any case that anyone's been brought to trial. I think so. The probably is two-tier application going on, and everyone knows it. There's a lot of fear about, which doesn't make it worse, but I think it's probably just an example of we see it all over the place in so many domains, weakness and two-tier treatment.
Well, if you call it art as well, not only will you not be prosecuted,
famously, sure,
you'll find yourself in the Guggenheim, or you'll find yourself in the Tate Modern. I mean, I remember being pretty horrified once when I went to the Guggenheim in New York City. And there were some lovely pizarros downstairs, and I was enjoying those. I thought, oh gosh, I wonder what's upstairs. And there was a Robert Mapplethorpe exhibition, which tries to sort of mix like sadomasochistic homosexuality with Christianity, and it's just there.
There's a famous. I'm not going to repeat it. There's a very famous piece about
the P cries.
And it's just it's disgusting, really. But that's moral decay. That's a separate thing. But I'm not arguing it should be that people should be locked up for it.
No, indeed not. But it nevertheless it testifies to a two-tier culture.
Yeah, sure.
What happened to the chap during the BLM riots that tried to set fire to the British flag on the cenotaph?
Indeed.
It was not nearly as high-profile a case as Hamid Koskin's persecution. If he got any fine or jail time, I'm not aware. So it seems that certain symbols are okay for desecration, while others are protected.
But it's not just that, right? So if you happen to own a book, it's a religious text, but it's your book, you paid for it, it's your property. It's up to you. You can do what you like with it, basically. I might not approve of it, but you can do what you like with it. It's yours. That case, in the cenotaph, he was attempting to burn public property.
Indeed.
Obviously a crime. And yet, in Bristol, apparently, you can destroy and smash up a public statue, throw it in a canal, and then the Bristol jurors will say, oh no, there's nothing to see here. So that's a major problem.
So it is a problem with application, you're right, but I fall... Okay, so I fall on the side of both the law and the lawyers are the problem, because we had Laurie Wastel on a little while ago, and he noted that racial and religious aggravation are, at least in writing, neutral terms, and they're only applied in anti-racist fashion, against Christians, against white men, etc., because of the diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology and the egalitarian ideology that the judiciary have bought into. But the very nature of a racial and religious aggravated offence is ideological. Like every crime is a hate crime. You don't stab someone out of love, for example. So it's still a speech crime, no matter how neutral the racial and religious framing is.
In relation to people going around stabbing people in markets throughout Europe and elsewhere, it's not terrorism. It's pretty terrorising. I mean, it's all terrorism. I mean, in my book, that is terrorism. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is why I'm by nature, despite being a sort of statey social democrat at times over things like housing and power, get the state involved. I want planning, re-established. Sane planning of the economy re-established. But I don't think just throwing more laws at these things is going to solve a cultural problem, which is everywhere. And the problem is that all of the elites have imbibed this, what Paddy Eflin, God rest his soul, used to call babyish, the stupid, babyish oppressor victim narrative, which is just false, and it's a babyish way of looking at the world. And once you've imbibed that, then it means anyone can become let's say a person gets a job and looks at the organisation and says, it's too male, pale and stale here. I think that's racist, because you're saying there's too many white people here.
Yes.
I think that's flat racism, and it's clear that it is. No one ever acts on that.
No, it's what James cleverly said after the election of Kemi Badenoch to much backlash. I think it shows a very deep disdain for a group of people. Yet, if you say that, if I were to say that, the Home Office is far too packed to the gills with minority diversity hires, of course you'd be denounced as racist. So.
Which you may be inclined to say.
Well, certainly after the Islamic network is thwarting people's asylum applications from Christian countries.
But this is the point. Someone with the basic, someone that hasn't been kicked in the head by a horse or isn't a lunatic, can see that numbers are real, right? So in the health service, black and minority ethnic employees are overrepresented in terms of the rest of the population. So you could say, well, we really need more diversity. We need more white people there. That's a rational argument you can make. It's never made.
It's a ratchet that only ever goes one way.
Only one way.
Which tells you what the actual story is behind a seemingly glossy slogan that they use. It's not actually something that they apply in
crime stats.
Exactly, yes.
Crime stats are the same.
Exactly, of course they are. And this is never applied in a neutral, sort of disinterested, universalist fashion, which rather gives the game away. And I think we should draw attention to those malign tactics a great deal more than we do. So let's just talk then about. So I mean, obviously you lead a political party. Will Connor and I are actually doing quite a bit of work at the moment together, collaborating. Off camera about how we would go about trying to restore Britain's great free speech traditions. And of course, it's partly a problem of the mentality that has seized the people, the lower magistrates, the sort of guidance they're given by the CPS. Often you get the police and the CPS just inventing new guidance without actually any statutory authority. Ministers lack the cojones to tell them not to do that. Nevertheless, I mean, it's not as if prior to the Public Order Act, we didn't have common law, certain common law legal principles that were actually very helpful at clarifying the boundary that exists between protected speech and unlawful action. It's not obvious to me why we needed this sort of expansion of statute from 1986 onwards. And I believe it was in 2008 and in 2009 that added to the lists of categories under which people could be prosecuted for stirring up offence. It all sort of began with the Race Relations Bill in 1965, which got rid of the old common law breach of the peace principle that just said, look, you can't breach the King's peace if your speech is likely to breach the King's peace, if it's likely to lead to imminent lawless action, which is the American phrasing for it. Then you fall afoul of the law. And I think that's correct. We don't want people to be inciting. But then this is sort of expanded in 65 and in 86, and then all of a sudden sexual orientation is added as a protected characteristic, religious aggravation, racial aggravation, all this sort of stuff. Clearly all of this needs to go, because it seems to me, because when you have this, the people who are ideologically motivated to interpret it in certain ways, they just have a bountiful reservoir of legal resources from which to draw, and surely we need to confiscate their best loved legal weapons.
Yeah, I think what's happened is, I mean, very, very broadly, what's happened is that you've lost the English common law, the common life. So once you've got that, you have also symptoms to deal with the blood on the floor. You're trying to deal with the fact that there isn't a common life. So you're trying to legislate all the time to sort of deal with contestations everywhere, and so legal arbitration is constant, and it's John Gray is brilliant on this. He describes what the American situation is as sort of low intensity civil war via legal means. That's different groups are just fighting. I do think it's a symptom, and I think what we've lost is a softer way of getting through things without recourse to this.
Yes.
So again, what a moral philosopher might just say, the accommodations we make every day to get along, to modus vivendi. And so, if you're going to say, well, we need more of this liberal legalism and more of this put in, I just think that's going to probably make things worse. I think you might be better off if you have a leadership and elite that actually backs the country and sets a moral tone.
That would be a good idea.
I mean, that's, if you have that, I mean, everything is better after that happens, right? Yeah. And you talk about political parties. I mean, the reason I'm involved is that I think people talk about everything being downstream culture. It is, but there's nothing like a vote, and there's nothing like electing someone. I think Trump too, although I think he's highly erratic on the things like the tariffs and things. I approve tariffs, and I think he's right. Steve Bannon's right on that as well. But the way he's doing it is a bit crazy. But he is better. He's affecting the real world in a much more acute way second time round because he's seen the first time round. So I think raw political power and what Lyndon Johnson would call, the ability to count in an elected chamber is very important. In the end, it's gonna be very important. It's the only, you don't have an alternative, do you?
Yes,
apart from that.
You are right to say that it is true. We have sort of thrown out the art of social negotiation between people. That is not supervened by an overbearing Leviathan. Or
the accommodations.
The accommodations for a kind of obsessive legalism, a kind of legal arbitrationism, which is a major problem. And a little statistic that actually attests to this is the fact that in 1911 there was one British lawyer for every 3,000 people. Today, there is one British lawyer for every 400 people.
Yes.
Which goes to show how much more important law has become as statute law has expanded at a machine-like place. It does. It does. And this is a major problem. And I do think that we need to try and cut some of this back. I'm sure you agree, Connor.
Yeah, well, I think that the thicket of law has only grown more dense as a ostensibly neutral arbitration mechanism between more atomistic and individual people. When you were saying there that sort of social custom used to govern these disputes and set a consensus as to what was and wasn't polite discourse in self-governing communities, you're describing essentially what Alan McFarlane put in The Origins of English Individualism, or that Alexis de Tocqueville observed when he went to America and saw that the structure of English civic life had been exported to America and was its secret source to success. That's been strip-mined away by mass immigration and a subsequent multiculturalism appeasement strategy. And it's meant that now, rather than the concentric circles of, as the SDP motto goes, family, congregation, community, nation, that insulate you, you've just got the individual standing naked and afraid in front of the state, its raw power, its law, and the arbitrary application of that law. And so the state steps in to stop all of these tribal minority groups and the individuals within groups that no longer see themselves as groups fighting. They step in to make sure that they play nice, which is why they always use the language of communities when they actually just mean like constituents and classes.
Yeah, you're having to referee it but it's also another thing. I mean, I agree with what you said broadly there, but I think the great liberalisation, individualism generally, has run riot, and the reason why faith, flag, family, community, nation works is, and we talk about it a lot, is because it's all about duty. It's all about us, and it's the I-we balance. It's if it is just about me everywhere, then by implication I don't have any duty to anyone else, right? It's just about me. It's what about I'm making my life, and anyone that gets in my way is obviously committing a rights violation against me. So that's the problem. And unless you get a sort of cultural turn, I mean, I think on the data, the younger British people are getting this in increasing numbers. So I think you are seeing a cultural turn, and you'll have to. But politics plays a part as well, and weakness is the biggest problem. It's the biggest vice.
You say that voting counts, Will, and that's why you are in politics, of course, at the moment. Obviously, this SDP is, as I said in the introduction, is sort of left conservative. So you're the corny old line, but there is truth to it. Sort of right on culture, somewhat left on economics. They're not kind of balmy central planners or anything like that.
Protectionist and traditionalist.
Yeah. You believe in what you call social markets. You can get into that. But reform is sort of a bit more Thatcherite in terms of its economic hue.
Don't really know, do we?
Well, it changes. Many of its
depends on the polling.
Many of it
depends on the polling.
That's a value neutral analysis. I'm not trying to be hostile to reform, even though it would be taken that way. It just does depend on the polling because some measures, if it's cutting waste with net zero and wokeness, they'll go for it. But if it's lifting the 2-child benefit cap or keeping the winter fuel allowance, even though it's not necessary if your energy's cheaper, then they'll back it. It is. They're trying to run to the. You said this to me before. The most electorally popular position.
Yes, it is.
Against their Thatcherite instincts, which is essentially the Trump position of state protectionism and welfareism, but for a particular people and a particular culture.
Yeah, but if you, I mean, they're a bit weak on housing. I haven't said much about housing recently, but and that'll be the next card to fall, I suppose. But yeah, on trade and on things like energy and water and even railways, they're saying quite sort of SDP type things. Yes. And I mean, okay, they also nicked the slogan, changed nation into country. Okay, they did that. It's obvious, but And in a way, it's flattering. But
sorry, nicked which slogan?
Well, for 5 years, the SDP slogan is family, community, nation.
Yes.
And Nigel's
that's
family, community, country. Okay, it's so close. It'd be a miracle. Anyway, considering we had an electoral pact with them, they did know us.
Yes.
So okay, that's fine. I mean, and in a way, it's gratifying. But the point is that if you really want to be successful, if you want the economy to really revive, you've got to know what reindustrialization is, how it depends on trade rules as much as anything else. Obviously depends on energy. I think they're probably right about. They've always been right-ish about that. You need to build some nuclear power stations. But on the other stuff, on where planning will count, actually, the state's role in energy policy from the ground up, not just saying get rid of net zero, actually what you would do, how you get the nuclear power stations up and running. You might even consider, burning coal again for a while. We're looking at that. But on things like housing and transport, it hasn't quite happened yet. But if Thatcherites suddenly, have a Damascene conversion to social democracy in that way, fine. But I generally prefer politicians that believe in what they're saying. I don't think...
Sorry.
I'm not sure they do.
The only reason I was raising it is just to sort of get it out in advance that you have some differences, some ideological differences with some of the leading lights of reform. Let's forget the kind of policy prospectus such as it exists at the moment, which is sort of actually quite patchy. But Tice and Farage are definitely dyed-in-the-wool Thatcherites, and you're not. That's all what I was setting up for is the question: are you nevertheless encouraged by the fact that they are riding very high in the polls, and will they at least, whatever criticisms you might have of them in ideological terms, will they at least? Are you encouraged that they may be on the verge of smashing the uni party, and that sort of sets everything up, makes everything up for grabs in a way that it hasn't been for 100 years or so? Yeah, no,
I think it's an essential job, and I think in particular if the two-party system. I mean, after all, the SDP was set up to do it. In 81, it was set up to destroy the two-party system, to have new politics, and at least get to a situation where the people in Parliament roughly approximate to opinion in the country. It just doesn't. If you have this filtering system and everything's mediated between the selection process of these two parties, which don't vary very much. I mean, they're all liberals, and basically there are some very good people in the Tories, but they're a minority, and they are just
they definitely are.
They really are. And so it's frustrating, but so I think the country's future depends on opening up new competition and getting new parties in there. So I'd like them to do that, and if they win an election, I'd like them to honour certainly Richard Tice I know he is very keen on PR and always has been. I'm a little bit worried that
he's keen on proportional representation.
Yes,
even if they win an election.
Well, no, he's I think this is why I mentioned it. I think he's conviction in it. I think he's been very keen on it. He regards the two.
Bad idea. Idea.
So but no, you're probably constitutional conservatives, fine. But the point I'm making, I'm trying to open it up. I'm trying to stop this dreadful mismanagement. My first line of attack on anyone that thinks the two-party system and first past the post should be retained is, you think we'll govern now? Really? Are you okay?
No, I think the two parties are dreadful.
The two parties, okay, that's a different one. I mean, and I one of my previous chairmen, Kevin Hickson, Liverpool University academic, is a very old-fashioned sort of state and nation socialist, really. And is constitutional conservative, and he said no, the SDP should win an election through first past the post. But I don't anyway. I'm worried that reform could be a wrecking ball. The country's using it as a cudgel. That's why they're successful. I mean, I don't think people are going in the county council elections in Durham. I don't think people were really analysing reform's political philosophy such as we know it. I don't think that happens. I think they really despise the SW1. They despise the lies after Brexit. Trust has collapsed. And so they're using reform. It's not them, so I'll use it as a cudgel. So it's a wrecking ball, and that could be very, very useful. But we'll wait and see. I don't know. I mean, I tell you one, and you should pitch it. I mean, they've nicked everything else. I wish they'd take our policy on the migrant crisis on the south coast.
1,200 came in earlier this week.
We have to solve this, and unfortunately, reform's policy won't solve it. And Henry Bolton and I he's the expert really in it. But you have the policy.
Your policy quickly, and then then we'll hear what kind of things.
Ascension Island. or South Georgia,
Offshore
something that
processing.
you control. And as soon as an unsolicited arrival comes, there's nothing. You just get to Bryce Norton, you're off, and then you're 2 years there, and you're either back where you came from or somewhere else. But you'll never ever come here. No one is paying €5,000 for that. It's gone. The model's gone, and the beauty of it, unlike Rwanda, which was just a ridiculous. Mike Jones was right about this. It was just a sort of a sort of publicity stunt, is that you have control of the jurisdiction. It's up to you what you do. Obviously, you have to get out of the post-war legal architecture. It's obvious. Anyone has to be honest about that. So the protocols we have to withdraw from that, disapply them, and ECHR as well. But once you've done that and you've built the facility, Henry tells me you can build the facility in about 5 months. I don't think it'll ever be used.
What you're saying is that operationally it's
it'll
not
never
very difficult.
No, you can do it, but they lack the will to do it. They don't want to do it. And they can have that policy. And we took legal advice 4 years about this, Paddy Flynn and I. We did it, and we got it right. And they can have the policy. It's the only policy that will save the country in terms of this chaos that's going on. So have the policy. But every time Richard and Nigel, whoever say, we're going to push back the boats, I'm just thinking, it's ludicrous. If you pushed back a boat that had 80 people and they drowned, the policy's over. Overnight. It's not even possible to do. If you said, come on, here we go, you're going to Bryce Norton, you're going to Ascension, or the flow would stop. No one is spending that money. They're only spending the money because the deal is so good. You get the British social wage for nothing. The British social wage on the figures is worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. You're paying €5,000 for it. So you're breaking in and getting something. It's a great deal.
And if you're working on the black market as well, it's not as if you're going to have any sort of
exactly.
overheads or taxes that you need to pay.
So that's a model. Yeah, and the smuggling gang's partner is Starmer.
Yeah.
He's in it. He's in it with them. So this is it. So you can have the policy. Please have the policy and put it into action. It's the only thing that will work, in my opinion.
Well, the other thing, obviously, the people smugglers advertise Britain as such an attractive destination. There are TikTok videos. There are other. The Telegraph did a very good investigation recently, not just into how these people are, crawling in and amid the black market and actually making fairly decent money for themselves, certainly much more money than they should be making, because of course they're not allowed to work, but they're sort of told that they'll get free hotels, free televisions, free iPhones, all these sorts of things. So you need to make it not a sweet deal. It's not enough just to go. Starmer talks about smashing the gangs.
It's BS.
Don't be total BS. But
no.
Even if it wasn't BS, even if he was really following through on that, you can't only be interdicting supply and not interdicting demand. You need to be doing both at the same time.
You want to dismantle the model.
Indeed,
he's got the incentives there. He's saying. And I've always said if I were, in the Middle East or I was, in West Africa, I might have a look at it myself because it's such a good deal. I mean, you'd be crazy not to. You can't. Saying. If we make this offer, this incredible offer, people will take it up, and you've just got to change incentives. And I don't know. Are people is the establishment so stupid? What is wrong with them? I don't really know. And also politically, Starmer has done exactly, and Cummings is right about this. He's done exactly what Sunak did. He promised something. We'll smash the gangs, mate. You're toast. You're not smashing the gangs.
Yeah, you can't massively raise the salience of that, and then
fail.
And then fail on it.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what
he will fail.
He will fail. Well, it's probably got something to do with a certain amount of post-war sentimentality, which keeps these sort of legal institutions that do prevent us from enforcing our borders effectively on life support. And you had a very good essay on this in was it on your Substack or was it? It was on your Substack about how Lord Hermer's jibe about anyone who wants to leave the ECHR being some kind of Nazi or some kind of fascist just goes to show how fanatically wedded the kind of human rights lawyer types, the creatures of the blob, people like Hermer, people like Starmer, are to these legal institutions, and how they're not going to countenance our leaving them, and as a result, not going to countenance our enforcing our borders effectively, however much they talk about smashing the gangs.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't forget that Starmer was the author of the textbook on how to apply Tony Blair's 1998 Human Rights Act for the British judiciary. So all of our complaints about free speech and hate crimes and immigration law, despite Starmer saying he doesn't want the Human Rights Act to apply to immigration cases to thwart your Home Office deportation order because your son likes domestic chicken nuggets or whatever, he's the one that thinks it should be on the statute books.
Because those are the important things, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Important things.
God forbid a Pakistani paedophile be deported because it's going to be too difficult for him to Zoom call his own children.
That's right.
I'm sure he's a wonderful, loving father too. Yeah. So, yeah, Starmer and Hermer gave that speech recently, which we're referencing.
Yes.
about...
We should say this is the Attorney General.
Yes,
of Britain.
yes, yeah, the treacherous Attorney General who's been acting as a salesman of our sovereign territory and represented, the jihadi Beatles and Shamima Begum and Mark Duggan's family and every other single sordid criminal that seems to have existed in this country. So he turned around and said that you are indistinguishable from the Nazis if you want to leave the trappings of international law, and then, like a moron, referenced the writings of Carl Schmitt, and then inadvertently proved Carl Schmitt correct in his critique that there is no such thing as a neutral institution or neutral law, because he said, well, we need to use international law to achieve progressive realism. So you're using this ostensibly neutral international law, which you presume is neutral because you think it can govern literally everyone from anywhere. Like, you take a man from Mogadishu, drop him in Manchester, and because of international law, he's as British as you and me. But you're also saying, I'm going to use the law as an instrument to achieve progressive ends, which just means, the egalitarian philosophy.
I just think it's so bad. I think these people are not fit to be leading us at all. And actually, the precedent for all this stuff is so far back. I mean, it doesn't... Nothing is new. The ICJ ruling on Chagos, which is 2019, you get a Chinese judge there. Russia invades Ukraine. Nothing to see there. That's not a human rights issue. That's not a breach of sovereignty of any kind. If you look at the composition of these international courts, I wouldn't back many of the countries in there.
Well, the South Africans banging on about the Israelis. Meanwhile,
come on,
they're allowing Julius Malema to chant "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer."
And I think we allowed him to come here. So this is the point.
But Geert Wilders is banned.
Great. Yeah. So
Renaud Camus was banned.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Quite. Yes. You're a very fine interview. So I think that's the problem. But it's not. None of this is new, guys. Right. Yeah. So they there's a very interesting, worth reading. I know it's a little bit niche, but the Salazar regime in Portugal was losing its colonies post-war, and the Americans were saying, get rid of these colonies. Portuguese were saying it was part of the Portuguese state, been there 500 years, and also many of the colonies, the people there are Portuguese, particularly Goa, if you had a referendum, if you had a plebiscite, they said it will stay with you. But it was the winds of change, and it was all going. So the UN, his foreign minister, Franco Nogueira, wrote 2 really interesting books, which I reread recently, and he just nails it. There's one called The Third World, and he's talking about all these new states are basically anti-Western. And what he says, crudely, is that they're using the systems of liberal legalism that we set up and we gave these institutions, like the UN, against us. And they're sort of holding us to account for these things, whilst they're completely free of it. Completely free of it. So it's being applied completely... And anyone steps back... Nogueira stepped back from it, it's just anti-Western. That's what it is. And if you don't... So I think nothing's changed. I think what he went through in the 60s... is exactly the same as what's happening now, and I think you have to be a naive idiot not to realise what's going on.
At exactly the same time that Starmer is very peculiarly anti-British, he clearly sees himself as a sort of thoroughgoing internationalist. He's nevertheless trying to cosplay lately as a sort of British Gaullist.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
He's talking about how at some point, we're not exactly entirely clear when, he wants to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP. He's talking about the need for there to be sort of 12 more nuclear-armed submarines. He's trying to pose as a kind of great British statesman on the world stage, free trade deals with India, a free trade deal with India, a negotiation around the tariff thing with Trump, a great EU reset, meetings with Tusk and Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, and Zelensky in, I forget where, Munich or Berlin or wherever it might have been. Are you at all convinced by this shtick?
No, it stinks. I mean, what you've got there. No, it is. And you talk about cosplaying. I mean, what's happened there is, and they started this as soon as it was Kate Ainsley that advised him that he was not going to win an election.
Who advised him that?
Kate Ainsley, I think, the advisor. He was a bit blue Labour. It's probably quite savage. This. I think it was her anyway. I think I got the name right. But and it was about sort of 20. It was during COVID that they thought, okay, we better find a British flag. Where do we get one of those? So this is the person. Look at his record. This is the person in 2016 fought more than any other British politician to screw Brexit over. He wanted to stop it more than anyone else. Tried every means in Parliament to get in the way, vote again, plebs, all the rest of it. And then a few years later, he's standing up in the press conferences there, and he's got his British flags behind him, and it's all, no, it stinks. I mean, and the thing is, actually, I don't think anyone believes it. If you look at the votes.
Yes.
By the way, I think, I don't talk about other parties too much, but I think, you heard it here first, I think Labour is more vulnerable in the next few years than the Tories are.
Why?
politically. But first thing is they're in government. They're making mistakes all over the place, and they're useless. So they will go down. I mean, they really would. I mean, and the Tories could theoretically recover. So I'm just saying, I think that's probably what will happen.
Do you agree, Colin?
Yeah, I would say Labour's got greater losses to hemorrhage, particularly in the Red Wall, because we saw that they completely capsized in their vote and lost pretty much all their councils at the local elections. And if people are energised enough to give them a kicking in the local elections, then the general election, especially in their heartlands, is going to be pretty bad. They're also going to be hemorrhaging to the sectarian Muslim vote, which Sam did well, and I have written extensively on. And
Greens.
The Greens as well, who, as you once quipped, are shouting Allahu Akbar, which means recycling in Arabic now. And as well, you're right about the Tories. I think that they can recover in at least a few points with the sensible move of ditching the second coming of Maggie Thatcher, which is Kimmy Badenoch, who hasn't turned out to be as wonderful as all the people that have made her career thought it would be, and just subbing Jemrick in, who's doing these very slick, very well put together social media videos and basically being a one-man opposition.
Yes, he's doing very well, and his correctometer's quite high. So yeah, I was actually at the count when that incident happened. I was at the count because we won another seat in Middleton Park in South Leeds, and he was there, and they were there with their crowd, and it was quite interesting. Yeah,
that's one way to put it. Interesting.
Yes, I've been at counts like that before.
I'm a little bit surprised because obviously I don't want to go on about this forever, but you know quite a great deal about trade, Will, and you have your sort of protectionist views on the matter. Yeah, I was not expecting Starmer to be as keen to secure a free trade deal with India, because if you go back to sort of 2016, 2019, it was the Brexiteers who were the Tory Brexiteers at least, or the Vote Leave types, who would be trumpeting a future of sort of piratical free trade that would follow in the wake of our departure from the European Union. And so I imagine that it would be the Conservatives who would be more keen to sell out Britain's national interests in order to deliver a perceived Brexit dividend of some kind. And given that Starmer, as you've just said, was consistently against Brexit, I didn't think that he would be in a rush to do that. Nevertheless, he has done that. Yeah. What are your views on that trade deal? Well, is it good for Britain? Is it bad for Britain?
It's not. It's very small. I mean, so first thing, I don't know. I've followed Starmer for years. I've no idea if he has any... Even if he has any views on economics or trade,
he doesn't dream.
I have no idea.
It's unlikely.
I don't know. He's never said anything interesting on it. He doesn't see. He's never proffered an opinion. So I don't know. I don't know.
The Supreme Court hasn't told him what to think yet.
Yeah, I don't know what I see. I don't know what he thinks. But the Indian trade deal is interesting. I mean, I'm very, and I spoke against this. I'm very, very much against any deal which puts foreign workers above British workers in any way. So the NI concessions they made, you make two tiers. I know I realise it's any small number. In this case, it might be 3,000, but you don't do that at all to your own workers, in my opinion.
Just explain what would
the deal gives preferential treatment to Indian migrant workers under the skills workers programme to basically to outbid British workers by several percentage points. Because they're having a holiday on NI that's longer, okay? Yes. And that's wrong. You're not going to put foreign workers above British workers in our own market. For me, I'm totally against. I'm against open labour markets anyway.
And you have no obligation to advertise the British first.
No.
Because Boris Johnson got rid of the one good rule that Gordon Brown passed during his premiership.
Yes. So there's that. But if you look at the magnitude of the India trade, it's very small. It's comical, really. I mean, we got ourselves into this awful situation where post-Brexit, we thought, and the BBC and everyone, the media thought that the measure of Brexit, the success of it will be in the quantity of FTAs, free trade agreements we did. No, I thought exactly the opposite. Again, me and Patrick O'Flynn were in 2019 saying, I don't want to deal with you because I want more trade friction because we've got a major problem. We've got a 90 billion trade deficit with the European Union every year. So you're getting poorer. You're actually getting poorer. You're selling your assets and you're issuing debt by that amount every year, and people wonder why the country's knackered and beggared. It's because you keep on running these crazy trade deficits. So the United States in the same boat. In a way, historically, Trump's attempt to sort of deal with it through some trade friction may be seen, if it fails and they go pop, which they could, maybe just sort of last gasp thing, how do we deal with this massive trade problem issue because no one wants to talk about it. The recent trade agreement with the United States, there's no such thing, right? There was a PR stunt by Starmer. You can't read it, it's not there. It was so narrow in scope that the apparent US free trade deal with the UK was 100,000 cars. Well, we sell them that anyway. So there's 10% tariff on that instead of a larger. That's all we sell anyway. And
didn't it freeze tariffs at a higher level?
Quota. Yes, there's a quota on that. So there's nothing there. And then there was, ludicrously, there's 13,000 tons of British beef. And I'm thinking, hold on, well, that's a few fields. I mean, like to an Australian, that's nothing. And so that's neither here nor there. And then the steel tariff, which was ostensibly under the deal, brought down to 0%. We don't export much steel to the States, I mean, for obvious reasons. They've got more steel plants. But Trump did a speech in Pittsburgh two days ago and said that the steel tariff's going up to 50%. So there, bye-bye, Starmer. Like, there's your little deal. Trump saying bye-bye, I've got the Steelers. So no, I think there's nothing there. There isn't and I wouldn't want to. We have balanced trade with the United States now, and that's why I'd keep it. I wouldn't want a full FTA. You'd get murdered. You wouldn't have any British agriculture left. Well, this country's lost virtually every industry it had post-war. Aviation, nuclear, automobiles. I mean, virtually it's been shredded, and if we lose the city, we'll have absolutely nothing left. You can't afford to lose agriculture as well. So, I hope the world comes around to the sense of a little bit of Gaullist protectionism and reindustrialization, because after all, if people are going around saying they're conservatives, the foundation of the family is the industrial wage. Always was.
But have you considered we've got more musicians, yoga instructors, and curry chefs?
That's superb. Exotic foods.
We're in dire shortage. We had no recipe.
We have the recipe, as Rowan Atkinson said, yeah. So very foolish. We're tremendously badly governed. And I honestly think the only solution is to get involved in. I know it's dirty work, right? It's hard work, politics, party politics, but it is necessary.
And would you, just very quickly, obviously we're going to be facing an election probably in 2029, maybe it'll be brought sooner as 2028, although that seems unlikely. What sort of role do you see the SDP playing in frontline politics over the course of the next 4 years or so? Are you going to be collaborating with reform, selectively and tactically collaborating with reform in places, collaborating with the Conservatives in places?
Yeah. I don't think so. No, I mean, we did the deal with Richard Tice. Nigel came in and the deal just survived, as far as I know. I mean, just survived. So it was a small deal with it. I don't think there's any deals. They're not going to do any deals with anyone. And
especially in terms of exchanging ideas as well, policy ideas, because you tend to have much more intellectual coherence.
Yeah. There's a one-way exchange now going on. Yes. I can't do anything about that, and that's fine in a way for good of the country. But we'll just row our own boat. I mean, the resurgence is on track. It's what political history says you're doing. Post-war liberals, even the Labour Party took 20 years. So 22 candidates, 122 last time. Obviously, we want to double that or treble that, and that's what we try and do. I'd love to win, without naming any names where we started, I'd love to win a seat in Holyrood next May. So let's see if we can do that.
Keep plugging away. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, as ever. You've been watching the programme. Make sure to like, subscribe, do leave a comment if you wish to do so, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode.
Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programmes, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.